SQLAlchemy DateTime timezone. SQLAlchemy's datetime type allows for a timezone equals true argument to save a non-naive datetime object to the database, and to return it as such. Is there any way to modify the timezone of the info that SQLAlchemy passes in so it could be, for instance, UTC? I realize that I could just use default equals datetime.datetime.uct now. However, this is a naive time that would happily accept someone passing in a naive local time-based datetime, even if I use timezone equals true with it, because it makes local or UTC time non-naive without having a base timezone to normalize it with. I have tried using pyths to make the datetime object non-naive, but when I save this to the DB it comes back as naive. Note how datetime.datetime.uct now does not work with timezone equals true so well. Datetime.datetime 2009 1600936 891,887. Datetime.time delta -1 64,800 # that's my local time offset. Datetime.time delta -1 64,800. Datetime.time delta 0 # UTC. Even if I change it to explicitly use UTC. Datetime.time delta -1 64,800 # it did not use the timezone I explicitly added. Or if I drop the timezone equals true. True # it didn't even save a timezone to the DB this time.
This URL. All timezone-aware dates and times are stored internally in UTC. They are converted to local time in the zone specified by the timezone configuration parameter before being displayed to the client. The only way to store it with PostgreSQL is to store it separately.
One way to solve this issue is to always use timezone-aware fields in the database. But note that the same time can be expressed differently depending on the timezone, and even though this is not a problem for computers, it is very inconvenient for us. Also, PostgreSQL stores all timezone-aware dates and times internally in UTC. They are converted to local time in the zone specified by the timezone configuration parameter before being displayed to the client. Instead, I recommend to use UTC timestamps both throughout the app and timezone naive dates and times in the database, and only convert them to user's local timezone before user sees them. This strategy lets you have the cleanest code, avoiding any timezone conversions and confusions, and makes your database and app work consistently independent of the local timezone differences. For example, you might have your development machine and production server running on cloud in different timezones. To achieve this, tell PostgreSQL that you want to see timezones in UTC before initializing the engine. In SQLAlchemy you do it like this. And if you are using Tornado SQLAlchemy you can use Since we use all UTC time zones everywhere, we simply use time zone naive dates and times in the model. And the same in case if you are using Alembic. And in the code use UTC time.
A solution is given in this question's answer. You can circumvent that by storing all datetime objects in your database in UTC, and converting the resulting naive datetime objects to aware ones on retrieval. The only drawback is that you lose time zone information, but it's probably a good idea to store your datetime objects in UTC, anyway. If you care about the time zone information, I'd store it separately, and only convert the UTC to local time in the last possible instance, for example right before displaying. Or maybe you don't need to care after all, and can use local time zone information from the machine you run your program on, or the user's browser if it's a web app.
The following structure is recommended to store UTC date and time data in the database as well as to prevent data storage that does not have such location information. The value stored in the database should be defined as follows.
If you want to see more, click on subscribing.